Hi everyone, looking to learn a little bit more about HTML. In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a registration form using HTML. Okay, so we're going to be practicing forms here as well as various inputs that allow you to put in your first name, last name, email address, have these check boxes right here, or radio buttons, or even allow us to upload files like so. Okay, so we're just going to be doing the UI for this, meaning this won't really have any functionality. But if you want to learn how to implement functionality, I'm going to direct you to another tutorial to do this, again, just using HTML at the end. So what are we waiting for? Let's do this. Once again, this is for those wanting to really cement their HTML skills after learning the fundamentals already. If you haven't, please do check out my course below, or do check out the freeCodeCamp curriculum as well. Okay, so start off on your code editor of choice. I am using WebStorm, so this is what it looks like. But of course, feel free to use whatever code editor you wish. So let's go ahead and create a new project. What should we call this? I'm going to call this HTML form. So HTML form, just like so. And I'm going to click create. So that's going to create a repository or directory in WebStorm projects. So that's a folder or directory made on my computer. As you can see, Anya Kubo is my username on my computer. And I'm just going to click create. So there we go. I have created essentially a folder on my computer, and I'm going to next add a file. So I'm going to make this an HTML file. I'm going to go ahead and call this index.html. So I'm just letting our code editor know to treat this as an HTML file. Hence, I added the HTML extension. So WebStorm's already added some boilerplate code for me, so just make sure that you have the same. So we've got the doc type declaration at the top of the document, essentially so the browser knows what kind of document it's reading. So just go ahead and add that first. Next, you'll see the HTML element. So that is the opening tag and then the closing tag, and its children element. So I've just tabbed them out, so giving them some space using the tab button on my keyboard in order to kind of make this a little bit more readable. So that is the parent element, and those are its children elements. There's one child and there's another child. So two of these are kind of equal in the distribution tree. As you will see, the HTML element also has a lang attribute that takes EN here for the language of English. So that is kind of specified as well. So just go ahead and add that HTML element like so with its opening tag and its closing tag. Next, like we said, we have the head tag. So that is the first child of the HTML element. Just go ahead and add that. And also the second child, which is the body element. Great. Now the head tag actually has metadata in it, as you can see here. It has a meta element that shows the char set attribute, and the char set attribute has UTF-8, which essentially means that we can read characters that are, from different languages such as Arabic, but as well as some cool text symbols like the snowman symbol, for example. So just add that there. And then we also have the title element, which essentially does not give us any titles in the document. However, it does display them in the browser tab. I'm going to show you this in a bit. So we have, once again, the meta tag that lives inside the head element. And then we also have the title element that has a title here. I'm just going to change this to be registration form. Just like so. And before we move on, I'm just going to show you what this looks like in the browser. So with WebStorm, we can just click here, or if you're not using WebStorm, please copy the path, copy the absolute path to this file that lives on your computer. And then in your browser, I just want you to paste it in. So just paste it in like so. And I'm just going to inspect this page. So once again, right click here and click inspect so that we can actually see the elements. And you'll see that head element and the body element right here with the meta tag and the title tags. So meta tag is just one that makes up the whole meta element, and the title element is made up of the opening tag and the closing tag. And you'll see that title here, registration form, but you don't see it in here, right? But you do see it up here. So just keep that in mind. The head will not show anything in here. That's what the body will do. So the body element is essentially what will contain all the elements that will actually show up in our browser. Let's carry on. So before we move on, I'm just going to also link up the CSS file. So to do this, we use the link tag. It is a self-closing tag. You can have that if you want. And it takes rel style sheet and href, and then essentially links this up to the file where we're going to store our CSS. At the moment, that has not been made. So let's go ahead and make that. So style CSS, I'm just going to create a new file. It's a style sheet. I'm going to call it style CSS, just as we've kind of been auto-completed there. So now we've created a style sheet. This file is called style.css. We've given the .css extension to let our code editors know to treat this as a CSS file, okay? Because the code in here is going to be different than here. Great. So just make sure that that lives in the head element, okay? Now, sometimes we can call this style. Some people like to call this styles. It's really up to you, whatever you name this file. However, just make sure that if you change the name here, that you have to also change it here. So let's go ahead and refactor and rename, and I'm just change this to styles. So now that should match that, and that looks great. Okay, don't forget to use Command S to save this file. That is the shortcut for saving it. Command S is what I'm using to save my file in WebStorm. Great. Now that we've finished this off, I'm just going to minimize that for us. I want to add some code in the body element. Okay, and to do this, I'm just going to use an H1 element. It's going to have the text. Well, we can just use registration form again. You can do whatever you want. And this just means if we save this file, so again, Command S and go back in here, that's going to now show up for us. Okay, that is showing up in the body. And if you look under elements here, you'll see that H1 element is also showing up. If you hover over it, it's kind of nice to kind of see what element exactly that corresponds to. So there we go. There's the H1 element showing up. Great, we've just added our first visible element. I'm just going to tab that out a little bit as it is the child of the body element, right? So we just want to, you know, kind of keep this neat and keep it readable. So there we go. Next, I'm just going to put in a paragraph element. So the paragraph element, well, we know that is a P. And I'm just going to put in this text. So please go ahead and do the same. We've got the opening tag and the closing tag. And the text says, please fill out this form with the required information. So now if we save this file, don't forget to save the file. And look in here, your document should look like this. Okay, great. This is looking wonderful. We are whizzing through this. Now, there hasn't been much, but I think let's just style this up a little bit. The first thing I'm going to do is actually get the body. So I'm going to pick out this whole element, this one right here. I'm just going to paste it in like so. So I've picked out the whole body element. And in fact, anything, if we had two body elements, for example, in the document, I mean, we wouldn't or shouldn't. But if you did, this styling will be applied to both. But as there's only one, let's style that one body element. So I'm going to go ahead and give this the width of 100%. I'm using a percentage, and it should take up the whole width of the document, okay, because that is the parent element. Okay, so that should take up 100% of the width. And as a height, I'm going to give it 100, not percent, but viewport height. So we should take up the height of this whole viewport. Okay, so from here to here. So that's what I have done. Now, for those of you who are eagle-eyed, let's refresh this. You will see that I have, in fact, taken up 100 of the viewport height. Okay, there's my body. But as the body does have some default styles applied, if you look in here, there's some calculated styles. It has a margin of 8 pixels applied. We actually don't want this. We want to override this and essentially make it 0. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to add margin 0 just like so, and that should override that H. See, it's struck through, and now that's gone, so that is good. Now, I'm just also going to change the background color of the body while we are here. I'm going to go ahead and change it to this pre-picked color of IBIB32. Okay, so it's this color right here, which is actually freeCodeCamp's color scheme. And I'm not going to change this to be pure white. I'm going to make it an off-white just to make it a little bit easier on the eyes. So that is the colors that I'm going to choose for the background and the color of the text. So those are the two CSS properties that you are going to need. So save that file and now refresh, and amazing. We can see that that has been applied. That is looking good. Let's continue. So now let's get to actually creating the form. I'm going to do so under the P element. So just here, and let's go ahead and use that form element like so. So that is my form element, and I'm going to essentially add an action attribute, and I'm going to use, just for now, the link that freeCodeCamp gives me for the demo. Once again, if you actually want to hook up this form to your own website, I'm going to direct you to a video at the end so you can essentially replace this link, so don't worry. So just go ahead and use that for now for the purpose of essentially this walkthrough. And next, I'm going to also continue by adding the method to this too. So the method attribute essentially specifies how to send the form data to this URL. Okay, there are many request methods. This is a little bit more advanced. It is in the HTTP request method part of my course. And I feel that we learn it a little bit later, you know, once we mastered CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. So for now, just know that there is a method called post, which will essentially send data over somewhere. Okay, so we're going to use the method of post here. So please go ahead and add the same. Great. Now, as the form is going to have 3 distinct sections, we're going to kind of put these 3 sections in an element called field set, because that is what field set is for. So we're going to have one here as the child, a second child, and a third child. So those are our 3 children. If you want to make this a little bit easier to read for now, that is what they are. So we have one child, a second child, and a third child, all in the form element. So please go ahead and add that with the closing tags as well. So we've got the opening tag and the closing tag in order to continue. Now, the first field set, so the first child, is essentially going to hold the name, email, and password fields. So let's go ahead and start by adding 4 labels. So I'm going to add one label like so. And then I'm just going to copy it. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, these are children of the first field set element. So please go ahead and add your 4. Once again, making sure that they have an opening tag and a closing tag. So like we said, the first label is going to be for first name, just like so. The second one's going to be for last name, just like so. We also have the email. And then we also have the password. So those are all inputs that we saw at the beginning of the tutorial. They also have their own label for those of you that were eagle-eyed. So if you save this at the moment and just have a look in here, we just have essentially our first field set, so our first child. Let's go ahead and I'm just gonna essentially open this up and navigate over this. But it just has some labels, okay? No actual inputs yet. We will do that soon. So once again, for labels, maybe let's have create a new password here, and let's just be a little bit more precise. So enter your email, enter your last name, and let's have enter your first name too. Great. Now let's get to styling up the labels a little bit more. So we're going to use a unit of measure that is rem, and essentially the rem unit stands for root em and is relative to the font size of the HTML element. And as the label elements are inline by default, as you will see, they are kind of next to each other. That means they are in line. We want to override this, and instead of displaying inline block, we want to make them display block. So let's just go ahead and add that to the label in order for them to essentially stack over each other like so. And the last thing I'm going to do is also add a margin to each one. The margin is going to be 0.5 rem, and if I want to add 0.5 rem just to the top and bottom and 0 to the left and right, that is the shorthand for doing so. Otherwise I could have also done this, which means top, right, bottom, left. But like I said, this is the shorthand for doing so, so that will be applied to the top and bottom, and this to the left and right. Great. So now if we look in here, you will see that margin has been bold added to the top and bottom, and 0 has been added to the left and right. Wonderful. And yeah, once again, if you want to check that out here, you can. Let's go into the form, let's go into the first field set, and there we go. The margin is there. Great. Now, finally, let's go back and actually add the inputs. So I'm actually going to add the input after the label text, but I'm going to nest it inside the label. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. There's many ways to do this, but for this tutorial, I am going to be putting the input in right here, and it's a self-closing tag. So that is the whole input element. Once again, it is a child of the label. To make this a little bit easier to read, here's our label, here's some text, and here's the input element that I have nested inside of it. Okay, and I'm actually going to just show you what this looks like. So at the moment it looks like this. It is very close. I believe the tutorial, if you're following on freeCodeCamp, asks you to put a space there. So just go ahead and do that in order to pass the tutorial. Okay, great. I'm just going to go ahead and do this for each one. So there we go. Put a space there. And then here, put a space there. And here, put a space there. Again, this is just to pass the freeCodeCamp tutorial. Great. Okay, so let's carry on. Now, for accessibility and for, screen readers, I also want to link the label to the actual input. And we can do so by giving the label a for attribute and the input an ID attribute. And now we can link the input to the label as long as this value is the same as that one. So for the first name, I'm just going to use first name. So that is the naming convention I'm going to use with the dash. We'll see it's red because already our code editor knows that this should be linked to an ID. So when we do that, it's no longer red, there's no errors. So let's do the same for the other ones, right? So once again, for attribute, ID attribute, and that's how we'll link this label to this input. I'm going to go ahead and use last name this time. Just copy it to make sure that it's spelled exactly the same way and link it. And do the same for here, so for, and then we're gonna have ID here, and this one is just gonna be email, and I'm gonna put email here. Okay, nearly there. For attribute, and the inputs here, so ID attribute, and then let's link it once more, and I'm gonna do a new password this time. So new password is what you should also put. And we've done it. This is looking so good. Next, we're also going to add a little bit more to the input element, and we're actually going to specify the type of input this is, because there is a lot. I'm going to show you how crazy it is. This type attribute essentially will change the whole visual of how this looks. So if I go ahead and for, the first one, we can put text. However, we really shouldn't bother because that is actually the default of the input. But, the freeCodeCamp tutorial is asking us to, so we're going to put it there, even though this really won't change much. Like I said, if you just left this off, it would essentially act the same, right? Because it's the default. But the tutorial wants us to, so I've done it. The input type email does have a type, so I'm going to add email here, and I'm just going to show you how this changes the input. So here we have an input, right? This is the default one with text. This is the default one with text. This one, however, as we know, has the type email. So this just means that, you know, if I was to put in something here that does not have an @ so like sam@test.com, that would pass. However, if I didn't have the @ I would get an error message if I essentially tried to submit this form. So just keep that in mind. Same for here. At the moment, this is just a typical text input. However, if I change the type of this to be a password type, you will now see that if I type in here, these little dots show up, right? This is different than me typing here because it's kind of treating this as if we were putting in a password, and for security, we don't really want people looking over our shoulder, seeing what password we type. It essentially obscures the input. Okay, great. So please go ahead and just do the same, add those types in now. Now, there is another type of input that I'm going to show you. So after the 3 field sets, I'm going to put another input here. If I save this, it will show up here as a text input. Just make sure that it is inside the form, because if we give this the type of submit, okay, and save this and refresh, it will turn into a submit button. So that input is now looking visually like a button and can be used to submit the whole form as long as it's in the form element. Okay, because we'll find the nearest parent that is a form element and essentially submit it to perform this action. Okay? So again, keep that in mind. There is just so many types of inputs, I can't even tell you, that are outside of this tutorial. One of them is even color. Check it out. So if you go color, this is kind of cool, you get this whole color wheel. Okay, and there's so many, but again, outside the scope of this tutorial, if you want to see them all, please do check out my codewithanya.com course. Great. So once again, please go ahead and add that after all 3 field set elements, and then just add the value of this too. So at the moment, the value for this, I'm going to, let's just put submit again. I mean, this won't change much because again, the default for this button is submit, but we want to pass the freeCodeCamp test. So let's go ahead and try this out. I'm going to go ahead and hit submit, and it goes to this URL as we kind of expected, right? However, it lets us submit it with, you know, not filling out the form at all. So I'm going to go ahead and actually add the required attribute to the input elements on the first field set. So for all of the inputs here, I'm just going to put required. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Please go ahead and add that too. So now if you refresh this and try submit, you'll get error messages. So I can put Anya, I can put Kubo, and the email, like I said, let's just mess it up, gmail.com. I forgot that @ right. And if I click here, it says please include an @ because it's an email input. So I'm like, oh yes, okay, @gmail.com. And if I want to create a password, I can also actually create a password that has a minimum amount of characters. So for example, on the password here, another attribute I can use is min length. And I could say the minimum length of this has to be 8. Okay, so 8 characters have to be submitted, and it just means, I'm just going to refresh this. Let's put Anya, Kubo, let's put my fake email. And then it just means that if I do 4, it will tell me, please lengthen this text to 8 characters or more, because I just added the min length attribute. So let's go ahead and do that and click submit. And ta-da! So we've now been taken to this fake registration page. Amazing. This is looking good. Now, we don't have to have this in a string. We could just have the number, and that will work just fine also. Now, we've obviously kind of said what minimum length we need. Another thing we can do is actually be very specific about what kind of characters we want the password to take. And for this, we can write a regular expression, or regex for short. Regex, I wouldn't really recommend, learning regex because there's lots of regex websites out there that can generate regex for you. But if you want to learn it, please feel free. I'm just going to show you how to write a regular expression. We're going to use the pattern attribute for this. And for example, I can say that I want my password to take lowercase letters from A to Z, or the numbers from 0 to 5, okay, and make sure that it is minimum 8 characters long. So that is how you would do it. Making sure to keep a space there. So now, once again, just put in Anya Kubo, just make up a fake email, and then here, if you try to put a capital letter, you can make it over 8 characters long. It will say, please match the format requested. So I just put loads of capital S's there. Of course, you can't see, but we're not allowed to use capitals. So I've just gone ahead and used a bunch of small S's now. So if you use small S's and some numbers, that should work. Okay, so now let's go ahead and continue on to the second field set. So here we go, we're done with that one. Here is the second field set. I'm just going to go ahead and add 3 labels. So 1, 2, 3, and let's go ahead and continue. So 3 labels this time, 3 labels to go in the second field set. So once again, that is it. Okay, just make sure you have these same. So once you have that, let's go ahead and choose what we're going to put in here. We are going to first off have the user allow to choose either a personal account or a business account. And for this, within each of the first 2 labels, we're going to add an input. So there is 1 and there is 2. And this time I'm going to use the type of radio. So please go ahead and use the same type on these 2 inputs. Once again, here's my first label, here's my second label. Just go ahead and do these same. And for the last label, we're going to use a different input. This is actually going to be for the terms and conditions. And for that, I'm going to use a checkbox type. So go ahead and do that, click save. And to see what those look like, you will see the 2 radio ones and the checkbox one. Now with the radio ones, we are going to have to somehow link them together, okay? So that is important. The checkbox one is going to be standalone, so we're not going to have to somehow link both of those up. And also we're going to have to make this required, okay? Because terms and conditions, we want that to be required. So just go ahead and add that required keyword there also. Great. So now let's go ahead and continue with this. I'm going to add some text. I'm going to say personal account here, making sure to spell personal correctly. And then we'll also allow a business account, but we can only choose either a personal account or a business account. That is why we chose the radio input. I'm going to show you in a bit. And here I'm just going to put some text. I accept the terms and conditions. So save that, and if you refresh, that is what it looks like, right? We've wrapped the label in here, and at the moment you can select both the radio buttons, right? Because we haven't linked this up. We haven't told our code editor that we want to either be able to choose this one or this one. So let's do that soon. First off though, I'm just going to switch these around so they're after here, and freeCodeCamp's asking us to put a space as well. So please go ahead and put that here and add a space on all of these, and don't forget the space. So now, in order to link up the 2 radio inputs, on the input itself, I'm going to name this as part of a collection, essentially. And I'm just going to choose account type as the name, and I'm just going to copy that and put it on the second radio input. So now if you save that, you will see that you can't select both anymore, okay? They are linked thanks to the name attribute. Now we know what inputs are linked. Okay, so this attribute right here, this name attribute, is a pretty powerful one indeed. Once again, for accessibility, let's link up the labels to the inputs. So let's use for and ID and link them up. I'm going to use the text of personal account for this one. So I'm just going to copy it just to make sure that it's exactly the same. Once again, for, and then this ID. This time, let's go ahead and use business account, making sure to spell it correctly. I'm just going to copy and paste it so it's exactly the same. Once again, for, and then here, let's use the ID. And this is going to be T's and C's, so terms and conditions, just like so. Let's copy it and let's put it in here. Great. So that is what you need to do. Next, we're going to actually get the text of terms conditions and hyperlink it to some actual real terms and conditions from freeCodeCamp. And also to do this, we're going to use the A tag because this is essentially allowing us to link. So I'm going to use the A element and href, and then I'm just going to paste in that URL like so. Just do it around the terms and conditions text. And now if we refresh, you'll see it's hyperlinked, and if you click on it, it will take us to some actual terms of service that belong to freeCodeCamp. Wonderful. Let's move on to the final field set because we are done with that one now. Here's our third one. And in here, well, we just want to allow the user to upload a picture, so a file. So let's go ahead and do it. Let's use the label again. And then let's put the input in, so everything that we have been doing. However, this input, well, it's going to have a different type. The type is going to be file. So just like so, and we're going to add some text as well. So I'm going to put upload a profile picture, just like so. Okay, so that is the code that you're going to need. So let's have a look at this. So if I now refresh, ta-da, and it allows you to essentially choose a file, which is pretty cool. Okay, amazing. Like sometimes I even like to essentially, I don't know which one we can do this one. It will show you the file name here. Sometimes you can even get it to display. I do this in a bunch of my tutorials, but for now, this is all it's asking us to do, so let's continue. Let's go back in here and I'm going to add another label. That's right. I'm going to do so after this one. So let's add a label. And this time there's going to be input your age. And then I'm going to put years, so people know to do it in years. Okay. And once again, this time I'm going to add an input. And it is going to be type number. Thanks, tab 9. That was a good guess. And I'm also going to add a min attribute here. The minimum of this is going to be 13. Okay, because users under the age of 13 are essentially not going to be allowed. So I've just added 13. And maybe let's have a max just for fun, even though I don't know why you would bother having a max. But sure, let's have a max. Okay, so that is what I would like you to do next in order to pass the test. Don't forget to space that out with a space so that this doesn't get counted in the max. Now I'm going to actually show you another element that is often used in forms. It's not an input, it's the select. So here is what the select looks like, and it takes some children elements, which are options. So here's the option element. We're going to have 3, or let's put in 5 actually. That's what it's asking us to do. So 5 options that live inside the select element. Okay, so if we look in here, here is your input and age, and then we're going to have a drop down of things. At the moment, our options, we do have 5, but there's nothing in here at the moment. We need to continue. I'm also going to actually make sure that this select element is not in the label up here. I'm going to create a new label for it. So just like that. And I'm going to take all this, put it in here, and let's put some text of how did you hear about us? How did you hear about us? So please go ahead and do the same. Now, let's put in some text into the options, right? The first one is asking us to put select one, like so, and then freeCodeCamp news, starting small for camel case, then freeCodeCamp YouTube channel. We can have freeCodeCamp forum, and then we're just gonna have other. Now, this is more for actually sending stuff over to the server. So if you save this at the moment and look in here, you can select certain ones, but nothing will actually be saved in the back end. For that, we need to save the value of each of these options, okay? And for that, we need to use the value attribute. So on the first one, we're just gonna leave it blank, because if we select the first one, the value we sent over is just gonna be nothing, right? Because, you know, this essentially doesn't really have a value. The second one here, I'm just gonna give it the value of 1. And let's go ahead and do the same for the others. I'm gonna change this to 2, 3, and 4, not forgetting to, you know, space that out. Just like so. You can even do it as a string. It really is up to you. Both ways is okay. Great. And now we could probably just get rid of that space. Okay, so once again, this is more for actually sending stuff on the back end, so the value that will be sent over with the form, because this will not be sent. If we select an option, this was what will be sent. So just keep that in mind. Great. Now let's create one more label. This is going to be for a whole area of text. So I'm going to use the text area element. This has an opening tag and a closing tag, and we're just going to add some text. The text is going to be provide a bio. So just like so. So now that we've done that, we know what to do. Let's use the for attribute and ID attribute to link up the labels to their inputs. So for the first one, let's use profile picture. I'm just going to copy that and paste it in here. Let's do the same for this label. So for, and then the ID here. So just like that. Okay, and this one is going to be for age. So I'm going to put ID age. This one is going to be for, and then let's find, well, this is going to be the select. And this time, this is going to be the referrer. And I'm just going to copy that to make sure it's exactly the same. And here for this label, so for, we're going to link it to the text area. And this is going to be the bio. So once again, just choose bio. So if you save this, this is what it should look like at the moment. It is looking really good. We can actually change the text area, and we can do it in here. So all I can do is give this another attribute. I can assign the rows to be 3 and the columns to be 30 if I wish. Okay, make sure that says cols, and great. Now, to give people an idea of what should go in here, in fact, I'm just going to space this out because this might take up some space. The fourth attribute is going to be a placeholder, and this is just going to say, I like coding on the beach, ... Okay. So we can add a placeholder. So if you save that, it'll kind of give people the idea of what to type. And as soon as you start typing, that will disappear. So there we go. Please go ahead and add a placeholder. Please use the text provided in order to pass. However, you know, when you're building this out by yourself, you can have whatever you wish. Now, the other thing that is good is to use the name attribute, kind of like we saw for the radio inputs. So just right here to identify the input in the submission process. So once again, this is a little bit more important for when you start sending stuff over. Okay, at the moment you might be like, why am I even adding this? It doesn't make sense if you're just building the UI, but this will make a lot of sense when you actually get to getting all the form data and sending it over somewhere, because then it's just a good way to kind of de-scramble all that information on the other end. So that is why we add the name attribute to each one of the inputs. Okay, so let's start at the top. So for example, this should have a name. I'm going to name this, you can name it whatever you want. I'm just going to name it the same as the ID. Same for this input. Let's give it the name of last name. This input, I'm going to give it the name of email. This input, I'm going to give it the name of new password. This input, I'm going to give it the name of personal account. If you're finding this too confusing and we want to keep the font and ID the same and name different, that is totally fine too. That is up to you. I'm going to give this the name of business account. Let's give this the name of terms and conditions. I'm going to give this the name of profile picture. Give this the name of age. Let's give this the name again of referrer. Let's give this the name of bio. And I believe that is it. So the HTML for this is now finished. Let's get to styling this up a little bit further. So let's go off and let's just say that all the text in here is going to have a certain font. That font family is going to be Tahoma. So that doesn't need to be a string, which is going to have Tahoma. Okay, and let's also set the size, so font size, to be 16 pixels. So just like so. Next, I'm going to grab the H1 element and the P element. So that's grabbing both. You can see there's a comma here. And I'm just going to give them both a margin of 1 EM auto. So once again, this is the top and bottom, and this is for the left and right. And I'm just going to align them in the center. So text align center. So now if we look in here, that is looking much, much better. Let's move on. Now let's go back and grab the actual form. Okay, so what we're doing is actually grabbing this whole entire form element. We're grabbing it, and what I'm going to do is give it a margin of 0 to the top and bottom, and auto from the left and right, and that will actually center it. Okay, and I just want to also make sure that the max width the form could ever be is 500 pixels. And we're also going to give it a min width as well. So min width is going to be 300 pixels. So we should stay between the 300 and 500 pixel range. Okay, great. And outside of that, the width should just be 60 viewport width. So this means that this is what the form will look like. The minimum will always be 300, the maximum will always be 500, and then otherwise it's going to be 60 viewport width. Now, I'm also going to grab the field set. So any field set, we have 3, and I want to remove the border. So all I'm going to do is do border none to override the border, so there isn't one, and then I'm going to do padding, and I'm going to just do it at the top and bottom of 2 rem, so 2 rem, and that means I'm going to do 0 from the left and right. Next, I'm just going to separate each one of them by adding a border bottom, so just like so, and I'm going to get 3 pixels solid, and I'm going to use this color that has been picked out for me. Okay, so now if we look in here, ta-da, that looks so much better, right? You see the little lines. I think this is looking good. Let's continue. Now the border of the last one is looking a little bit out of place. So we're going to select the last field set element by using a CSS pseudo class. So what I'm going to do is grab field set, and I'm going to do last of type. So it's going to look for the very last field set element in my document. And what I'm going to do is say that I want the border bottom to be none. So I'm overriding it. Okay, it's below here, so I'm overriding it. And that should get rid of that final border on the last field set. So that is pretty cool. Now, I also think it would be nice to have the labels appear above form elements. So I'm going to essentially get all inputs and the text area and the select elements, so all of them, as we know we only have one of each, but still, and then I'm going to make them take up the full width of their parent elements. So what I'm going to do is make sure that the width is 100%, and I'm also going to add a margin to the top of the elements. Okay, so what I'm going to do is add margin top 10 pixels. Or if I just wanted the top and I want it to be 0 everywhere else, I could do 10 pixels on the top, 0 on the right, 0 on the bottom, and 0 on the left. Now, for the second field set, I want the input and label text to appear on the same line. So at the moment, this is what it will look like. It's looking really good. Over here, I actually want the label and the input to appear on the same line. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and give each of these inputs a class name that I'm going to choose to call inline. So 1, 2, 3. Then now we can pick out that class name. So dot means class name. We're looking for a class name in our document, and I'm just going to give them the width of unset. So just like that. This will remove the earlier rule which set all the input elements to width 100. So there we go. Great. Once again, I'm just going to manipulate the margin. I'm going to add, well, if we do 0, that's top, right, bottom, left. I'm going to change the right margin to 0.5 EM. So at the moment, it looks like this. This is looking cool. However, if you look close enough, you will see that these are a little bit too high on the line. So what I'm going to do is also use vertical align, and I'm going to change this to be middle. So it's a very small change, but now you'll see that is way more aligned. Now, I'm just going to also change the background color so they're not so harsh on all the input elements and the text area elements, not the select element. And I'm just going to change this background color to be hash 0A0A23. Okay, and then let's also go ahead and override the border. I'm going to make the border 1 pixel solid, and then hash, yeah, let's just make it the same as that. So now that is what it will look like. However, you can't really see the text, so let's go ahead and change that text. I'm going to change the color of the text to be essentially white. So that's what it's asking us to do. However, the shorthand for this is this. And then I'm also going to change the min height to 2 EM as well. Okay, wonderful. So now this should look more like this, and the text will be white. Great. Now let's work on the select element. So let's go ahead and grab the select element, and we are going to essentially say that we want the select element to remain white. However, we want to share the min height attribute. So what I can do is essentially move this in here so that all 3 of these have the min height. Okay, however, we've already picked out those 3, so I can just add it here instead and get rid of that. Great, just to make our code a little bit neater. And now we're going to style the submit button. So the input with the type of submit, which means I can grab the input and I can look for it by its type. So I can literally search for an attribute in there, and the attribute of type that we're looking for has the value submit. So that's what we're going to do. We're essentially picking out that input by its type, and I'm just going to use display block on it and then change the width as well. So width is going to be 60%. Okay, wonderful. Now let's also center this, and all I'm going to do is add margin 0 to the top and bottom and auto to the left and right in order to essentially center it like so. So there we go. Now I'm just going to also give it the same height as the rest of all the fields, and that's 2 EM, and let's also increase the font size to 1.1 REM. And we are nearly done. We're just going to add a background color as well, and this is going to be 3B, 3B for F. And let's change the border color as well, and I'm just going to make it white. Or if we want, let's just keep it the same. So there we go. I'm just going to keep using the hexadecimal values for it. However, it doesn't really like that if you want to pass the freeCodeCamp test. So just make sure to keep the text white in order to pass that exam. Okay, so at the moment it looks like this. I'm just going to change it up a little bit. I want to change the margin property to actually include 1 EM on the top and bottom while leaving the left and right margins to auto. Okay, and let's also change the width to be a minimum, so never drop below, so min width 300 pixels. Okay, so that is looking good. The other thing that I want to do is just style the input with the type of file. So we know how to do this now. We're going to look for the input with the type of file so that we can style it up. And all I'm going to do is make the padding to be the same as the rest. So let's use 1 pixel on the top and bottom and 2 pixels on the left and right. And finally, on the form itself, I'm just going to pad it out from the bottom. So I'm just going to go padding bottom, and I'm going to add 2 EM to it. Okay. And last but not least, I want to pick out the text on the terms and conditions. So we can grab it by the A element. So let's do that all the way down here, A, and I am going to change the color of this to be hash DFE2. And there we go. We have now completed our registration form. This is looking so good. Just going to minimize that for you. That is what the whole thing would look like. Of course, it looks much better when you're kind of scrolling. But there we go. There it is. And of course, if you fill it out and you hit on here, it will take you just to the freeCodeCamp demo page. If you want to learn how to actually hook this up using just HTML, okay, no fancy PHP, you don't have to build a server or anything, please check out this video in which I do it. It's perfect for beginners and it will allow you to essentially have a working registration form or any form for that matter on your site. Okay? So great, I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you check out the next video that I just recommended, and I'll see you again soon.